raise your hands, designers in the room? Designers? People considering themselves leaders? Nice. It's a good spread. We're going to talk about all of this today, and we're going to talk about designing and leadership kind of in that combination, and leadership as a service, and my deep belief in it, that it should be inclusive and accessible to everyone as a skill set. So, as mentioned, I'm Alex. I'm going to tell you two things. This is how I feel right now. Just like, I feel like I, arrived on this train from London, sat and talked for 2 hours, and now I'm talking at you. I'm so sorry, but hopefully that's going to be entertaining. I do feel a little bit like this. I'm a bit terrified of audiences. Also, English is my third language out of my 4. So if I say something really funny, like mix my A and the articles, or do something like this, it's because I'm translating in my head from my mother tongue, so I'm sorry about that. In fact, yesterday during a workshop, I called product managers, project managers. Both sides got upset. Like literally, they were like, this is not quite what I meant, but I did try. Right, we are going to cover some things today. We're going to cover dream jobs. We're going to talk about leadership, intent, service design, and service-driven leadership. If that's interesting, stay tuned. If not, feel free to kind of meditate and think about your own things. Now, let's play a game. I love playing games. So let's see if this works. No pressure, live demo. Try and scan this QR code and see if anything in that survey that I've, like literally there is one question that I need you to answer. Let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. Please tell me it works. Yes. Oh my God, it works. I can't believe it. Okay, no pressure. So there is a question in there. And who did you want to be when you were growing up? And let's see, will we see the results in here? I'm really hoping. Are you voting? Yeah. Yes, you are. Damn it. I hate. Do you have to log in? I hope you don't. Oh no. Damn it. You didn't have to? Is there any results? Yes! Oh my God, that's it. My mission is complete. Right, so let's see what the votes are in the audience. You wanted to make things. That's, not surprising considering you're designers. Second one is you wanted to be someone specific, singer, dancer, doctor, and so on. Interesting. You know what's interesting? So let me tell you that as a story. So I can relate to everything that is in here. It's interesting, none of you want to be remembered. Great to be in the room with a lot of humble people and people who want to make change, which is good. So this particular thing, right? I wanted to be someone, or like I wanted to be a designer. I wanted to be a certain thing. Let me tell you a story about this, which is going to be relevant once I find my mouse in this, and I found my mouse, and we're back to Keynote. Magic. Sorry, this always works a little bit. Okay, so only 4% of adults who dream about certain jobs become what they dreamt in their childhood, which is interesting, right? Just have a think about this. Are we wise? Are we following our dreams? Are we wise in not following them? So that's really, really interesting. Contrary to what you just said, you want to make things. I kind of never framed my life around who I wanted to be, to a degree, and never really wanted to be in design. Didn't know what design is. Look at this beautiful Soviet picture. That's me. I was born in the country that doesn't exist anymore, Soviet Union, and I went through this interesting journey of changing countries many, many times. Sometimes involuntarily, sometimes voluntarily, and then landed in the UK. I've done quite a few things. Such as painting, drawing, it's part of a classical degree, done academic drawing and so on, done cinema studies in Italy, was awesome, produced all sorts of like experimentative stuff in media. I realized I didn't want to make another thing and make another building. and pollute the world, sort of. And where I realized what I really wanted to do is make things that helped people, and ideally were not things. And this is my brief to myself when I started my career. I was like, I want to do things that help. So what are those things? And this is where Lou Downs' definition of services comes in really, really handy, and I believe in it deeply. So service, she says, is something that, helps people do something else, which is perfect in its simplicity if you think about it. So it helps people do certain things like traveling. So in my time, I've designed some of the British Airways apps. That's one of them. Find a job. This is a jobs portal I've created for GSK for people to find jobs. To better understand dyslexia, and I've worked with people who have dyslexia, and we created this thing to help businesses understand what is a reasonable adjustment, which is a very vague term that people use. Then to find books with diverse representation. This is a platform that we created with a friend that shows or gives you more options around book choices in the UK from independent booksellers, but also very, very diverse. My mixed race daughter could not relate to a golden hair Rapunzel. Another one service that we created is around inclusive imagery. So we created something to ensure that your next pitch deck doesn't only have white hands. So everything I designed kind of, I went through this design path, and like a lot of yourselves, I want to kind of make things, but I don't want to make things. Everything fell into the category of services neatly. And I was like, okay, I found myself in a place of leadership, which naturally happens to you if you take more responsibility, which you're leading things. And it looks like that, but actually, this is pretty much this is one of my favorite gifts about leadership. Please, if you take anything away from this talk, take this gift. This is how it feels in the beginning, definitely. Organizations had expectations of me, really high expectations, and I wish this quote wasn't real, but it is real. So I worked with boards very, very quite often, and that's what they thought I'm going to do, come and fix things. And I was thinking to myself, can we design leadership as a service that you can enter? We apply design to everything, so can we apply it to the leadership path? Can it be more intentional? Can it be people process, quality-focused leadership rather than kind of just this magic test that you do and then you try to comply to certain norms? Can it be more scalable? So I've used that. I've essentially tried to design leadership within the roles that I was a part of. And I argue that the role of design in business should be an ever-evolving service. And, designing service is a sequence and designing leadership is a sequence. So I'll talk you through 5 steps that I learned. And hopefully it's going to be helpful to some of you who are entering leadership or are through this process. And you're like, okay, what else can I do with my team in order to move kind of them further? So step 1 that I did in the quite a few roles that I was a part of, it's very much about mapping the terrain. What I found interesting is that, once you become a new leader, people expect things from you done differently suddenly. And you're still a designer, and you're suddenly forget to use the tools that you're best comfortable using, which is design tools. So in a way, I tried to come back to it, and I did. So what I've done with a lot of my teams, and this is the last team that I led, I mapped the terrain. So I mapped who they were before I joined, what are the cultural clusters that the team has, who are the people inside the team, what are they responsible for, what they love, what they hate, are they burnt out, what is happening at the moment in their world. What are the things that they would love to be doing? What are they very good at? What do they want absolutely to not do anymore? And so on. And in essence, I try to understand them and map them in many, many different ways. That's kind of the step 1 is very much, instead of actioning of what leadership asked me to do in the first 3 months, I said, I will map the terrain. Second step, co-creating things with people is going to sound really, really trivial, but co-creating vision with a team, vision with a client works. So this is the work we've done. And through this work, so perhaps that exercise would be useful. Through this work, we've learned, so in here you can see the warm-up, we kind of learned each other's favorite kitchens, we learned each other's values, we learned things that we can't kind of thread on, things that we need to work with. And then we landed on a vision where we looked at, bucket exercise, where we didn't want to do certain things, never again, less of this, more of this. So like, what would we like to be doing? That's very agency side, but it is applicable in many, many ways to client and product teams as well. We've done the sailboat. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with that exercise. It's very much about what kind of pulls you down and what pushes you forward in that journey. And then we landed on a vision together. It's very wordy, right? It's not something that you would, when you're coming up with a vision for the client, it needs to be snappy. When you're building vision with other people that are believing in it equally, it needs to contain everyone's voices. And that's what we've done. And people got behind it, and we built an amazing team as a result of it. We've experimented with things. So you can see, we said we would never put a designer on a project alone anymore, and we stuck to it. Amazing stuff. So there would always be a pairing, like in creative industry, where you have a copywriter and a creative director working together. You would have a pairing. You would have a flow day, which means you would be absent from all the communication, including Slack. And if people see that symbol, that means they don't trouble you and you are focused on whatever you're doing very, very much. This maps all the team and opportunities that they would have to work together. So say Trevor never worked together with Daria on a project, and me resourcing them, I would know as a result of this matrix where I would like to create more pairings and give people opportunity to work together. So that's another kind of useful matrix that could be used in those scenarios. So we said mapping, we said co-create vision with people. Third one is very much about acting beyond boundaries. So I'm a big believer that none of these processes that are really kind of what company-wide related need to reside in HR departments. And like those people are there for a reason, is great. But actually, if you have advocates across the business that people are willing to make things better, work with them, work together. So after COVID, our leadership they were quite, how shall I put this? Old school, they loved in-person work. And they said, how should we do it? How should we come back to the office? I said, well, the framing should not be like, how should we come back? But the framing should be, what are they looking for? What would they like? What is happening now? How can we support that? And how can we still do the good work we're doing? So what I've done is ran the staff survey and kind of interviewed people individually. And you can see the results of it in here. And in simple words, that's for the board. Because as lovely as they are, they didn't have time to go through the whole report. So we're talking about like people voicing their opinion in certain things, preferred frequency of being at the office, preferred days, and what's good work arrangements, what kind of things need to be supported. As a result of it, we found an office that works, and they, to their absolute credit, they supported the outcome of this, and we designed the spaces on the basis of people's feedback. And we designed the policy. So we've designed a culture manual, which tells you exactly like, location. I would like to go to Seychelles, France, and ski lodge, so I will choose to be there for the part of the year. And there is an official company answer to that, and like how long can they support it? And the answer at some point was certain, like 3 months. And it really depends on kind of the arrangement, but we put those into the design scenarios. And we're all familiar with design scenarios, right? And that was a part of the culture manual. Values, of course, and how we behave. It's very much like we had values, but no one kind of knew what that actually means in terms of behaviors. So we translated them into behaviors, and design team helped with that. Christmas party design, I really love that story. So all of us work in our projects, as little, as large as they are, we still focus quite a lot on our work, right? So we don't necessarily like every day think about how that contributes to anything bigger than what we're currently doing. So what we try to do as a leadership team in design, we analyzed all the projects done by the design department in a year, mapping it back to like trends and things that happened during COVID, and it was COVID year. So an example of that was that 3.2 million people apparently, I think it was Europe-wide, if I'm not mistaken, got new pets during lockdown. we reframed that in the sense that, we helped animal owners to have a better quality of life with their furry friends. Our actual design was a platform, but designers who were designing that platform, they were not thinking about this when they were designing. It's very much, they were like, oh, I actually helped something this year. Yeah, great. No, I haven't just made an interface. I've created change. I've mapped that change back to something that is actually happening in the world, which was very, very exciting. So that was a great moment to share with the team. We continuously experimented. I mean, I joined a team on a screen in COVID. There was like 12 of them initially, then we grew to 20, and they were all like, they were just like heads on the screen. So lockdown hit, and we were trying to create spaces for us to be together. So there was a point in tier 3, I think, when you were allowed like one thing outside. And this is that one thing outside a week when we did themed picnics where we all brought our childhood foods and we talked about our childhoods. And the team is very diverse and very multicultural. So we discovered that we're so different in many, many ways, yet so similar. So it was a very interesting. Then we did the movies, same thing, favorite movie. Food from the movie. There was a lot of this stuff which brought us closer as a team. We experimented with allocation. So I have protected allocation within the team from 10 to 40% time for growth based on kind of number of reports the person has, based on leading the domain and any cultural activities. What that means in simple words is that the more senior you get and more responsibility you get within the team, more time you have to then further develop, and you can allocate some of that time to more junior team members as well. So like that time worked on a flexible basis. First time I introduced it, the CEO was not a fan of this idea because everything has to go to the client time in an agency, as you will know. However, that worked a lot for productivity and revenue. So magically was a success and keeps running. That enabled us to design learning. So we designed stuff like museum quests. We have designed interactive games for our team to interact with and to learn typography within British Museum, to explore different things for that time. And we would always protect that time. We implemented a zero-time overtime policy, which would mean a couple of things. Say you work a week and you go overtime. And of course, we would react and we would recalibrate as a result of that, but we would also give you time back as a holiday. And again, first time I've introduced this as an experiment, CEO said, people are going to abuse this policy. They never did. They never did. In fact, they flagged it much earlier than it would happen, going, I don't have enough time to do the activities that we planned together. Can you help me recalibrate? Because I do feel that responsibility for time suddenly, which was not that, it's a difficult issue to have a grasp of. So that was a really, really great step to take. Definition of skills, something that we've done is obviously we kind of clearly map the skills we have within the team. So we have strategy, planning and structuring, research, UI, content. Those are craft skills and they're super important, but what we thought is even more important is human skills. And we put those into the hiring metrics, and we hired people on the basis of those skills, as much as the skills within, interface, product design or service design, whatever we needed. And those skills for us were leadership, collaboration, and business acumen specifically. And within those domains, we had elevating others as a part of leadership, which was important. And we came up with those things again as a team, and we solidified it so that next time someone says, when you're hiring on culture, what do you mean? Well, this is what we mean. Someone who is responsible and accountable and elevates others, someone who encourages other voices to be heard in the room. That's who we're trying to hire. So very much, it was very much that progression framework. That's another tool that we use to kind of map the progression of those skills. My favorite part, what we've introduced, is how do you feel about the activity actually in a journey way. So like say you say something like, you love customer journeys, you understand how to create them, or information architecture, you're, consistently delivering them, but you feel that you're bored the hell out of this and you want out and you want to consider something else. So As a line manager, I would look at this going, I understand like how you feel, therefore I can help create opportunities for you to develop in different ways. There's two kinds of responsibilities. One is to the company and revenue, and another one is to individuals and people who want to grow in their own careers. So that's another one. Last step in that mapping, from mapping to kind of useful frameworks to designing leadership is pivoting, right? So my last team was sold out to an advertising company for a lot of money. And as a result, there was a massive merger and a lot of cultural shifts happening. So what we had to really quickly, what I had to help the team do is two things, is recalibrate and decide for themselves what they want to do. Can they bring value in the current context? Or do they need to exit and try things somewhere else? So we've done two things. We've reformed our leadership team. You know how usually leadership teams are the most senior people in the business? We took a cross-cut and we said our leadership team is going to be from junior designers to midweight designers to senior. So there is always a person on a certain level as a part of the leadership team. It's a holacratic model, worked in a lot of countries for different councils, different representatives. Not many people use it in the UK or businesses, and we felt like it's our opportunity to reform things. So it's very much like this cross-section of the team. A couple of things happened. We started hearing real issues. We started understanding what is happening within the merger and how we can react to it. So that reform was definitely a success. The another thing that we helped people do is move from jobs to roles. So it's very much moving from responsibilities, talents and stuff to be done and condensing that into like what people actually wanted to do. So how do I know you as Jane, the community manager, or Jane, the midweight UX designer? This tells me not like the actual job that you're hired to do very often tells nothing. But what does tell is the passions that people have and what they actually are interested in investing their time in. So we switched to a completely different setting in the leadership team. And the last part that we've done as a team was the personal narrative. So this is a traditional, Freitag curve. You can call it however you want to. It's a narrative, try-fail cycle. There is a hero. There is a world in which it exists in. Plot. There is a climax, resolution, and kind of an outcome. And I've asked the team to go through it with their own life and map their career, map their life to this narrative. And I encourage every one of you to do the same. It's quite interesting. I don't think we ever do that reflection. And I found it really, really useful. Some of them understood that in this try-fail cycle, they're now actually in the try and they want to stay and they like this challenge and there is a specific kind of pattern to it. Some of them realize that, no, they've done a lot of stuff like this before and they want to go. And they use this to shape their LinkedIn profiles, to shape their, how are they unique in the industry? And what is it that kind of brings the best in them and in their path? So that was really, really useful as a design exercise. So, step to designing leadership. I really hope this is going to be for everyone accessible, that we can have people stepping into leadership and not having this wall in front of them where they have an expectation to do something whilst they're not ready. So therefore, I argue mapping is the first part. So it's like map the terrain, agree the terrain with people, understand where your impact is. Second part is co-creating together and in the most active way. And one of my favorite principles is disagree and commit. So sometimes as a leader, you will see that the team wants to drive in a different direction, and you do have to accept that direction in certain cases when that will mean that you will reach to a better place together as a team. Acting beyond boundaries, I don't believe in departments, in hierarchy as well, broadly speaking, and I feel like you should kind of broaden the boundaries of your influence across mind-blowing thought. All the departments are created by people and perpetuated by people, and all these models are kind of just something we agreed, but we can disagree. And then, see what happens. And then the fourth part is experiment. So break, seek to evolve, change, use your design skill set and other skill sets to contribute to that change in the company. And then pivot when you see that it needs to change directions. It feels like very, very important step in anything, recognizing when to shift and when to help others shift. So that's kind of the last part in that leadership thing. How do I know it worked? That is our team in our underwater party. Luckily, I'm not in the picture. I swear to you, it was as colorful as that. I don't know if it worked. I do feel like there was a moment in there. There were a lot of moments of unity, a lot of moments of creativity together, untriggered, where we all kind of came together as a collective and done great things. So using your design skill set to design leadership approach works. Making your business better by design, it definitely works on a commercial level as well. I can create a different talk about it. Come talk to me about numbers if you want to talk about numbers. I don't. What's next? So we started Cosmic with two partners of mine that I actually met in that company. I realized that we share this desire to use design as a skill set to make things better, to create better things and better services. So we now do that. It mostly looks like this. There's three of us. We have a temporary office. We have dogs, children, everything is in between. And we are helping clients to make the world a better place, a more inclusive place, a more interesting place. Those are our three first clients. Jesus, like we're 2 months old. I'm just going to say this. These are the people that we're now working with, and we're helping quite a few startups, like starting to help different design agencies to do service design in an inclusive way. So that is us. And I hope some of that was useful. In the last company, I guess the difference between like a really good leadership team or management team and not so good one, is how much freedom you have, freedom of action, freedom of experimentation. And when I joined the last company, they were very much open to experimentation as long as commercial and revenue targets are hit. And that's something I had to take care of at the same time with running the experiments. And it's a balance, right? So you say how open, they were open in comparison to some other companies where they're like, yeah, we want change. And you're like, well, here's the process and here's the investment you need to make. Any change comes with investment, be it a small investment, an investment of time, people's attention. And sometimes people just go, oh yeah, no, but we just want change, but we don't want to make the investment. And that is a difficult situation where you find yourself in kind of trying to fight your way into the change. Which I found difficult, but I've learned a lot. Like all these exercises you've seen, they're not the first iteration. So I have done quite a bit of transformational work throughout. For me, the material is Teams actually is really interesting and fascinating material in design. So I have learned through difficult things. And then in that last company, it was really, really like the board was open. They were just like, okay, make change. We will empower you as long as this works. And this is where the balance is between kind of making it work commercially and making it work for the team. So they were amazing, honestly. Like I'm very grateful for their trust and support. When you enter that leadership track is difficult because you do work with boards and they're like a formed group already. You're coming into the formed group and they're like, who are you? Yes, we kind of do want change, but we're also not really open to it. So I have struggled with it. I have found ways of, as Tom was saying, small experiments and kind of going, have a look at how brilliantly this worked. Let's try this on a larger scale. So it was a path for me. Definitely not like all agencies are different. And I would say the ones that kind of survive longer tend to have that better culture and kind of better understanding, at least from what I've seen. So there are a couple of things I would do, and we certainly had that. I would go into the behaviors as in why and their underlying motivations, the mental models of people who want and don't want to do it. And I would still find a common ground. It's really, the answer is the favorite designer's answer. It depends, because it does depend on, if you look at the overarching company culture, there are also always culture champions. And if one of those culture champions, for whatever reason, their opinion goes against the whatever majority opinion, as you're now giving an example, you're going to kill a proportion of culture if you're not going to account for that opinion. So I think it's very important. It's like a strategic game. You look at the field, you're like, okay, these are the things that we absolutely need to do and we need to include. I would look at like why and then work with the why. And to be honest, like I've seen offices account for hybrid. We're now doing hybrid workshops. We have this owl magic thing like rotates and like shows everyone in the room, shows everyone. Yeah, so things are possible. It's just how much you want to really make sure that everybody's heard. So I would account for the two people. If you want my honest answer, yeah, I think they should be subverted. And the absence of hierarchy doesn't mean the absence of structure. So to me, I was always trying to see where the hierarchy can be challenged to the level that different groups can be created. So there are two things that are conflated in here. One is a behavior thing, which I believe what you're describing, like it just should be kind of on a cultural level, just stopped in terms of like the way we've done it as a team. We have a rule that everybody speaks within the meeting. And like, if you don't feel like talking, you let people know and so on. But in general, everybody is heard. Therefore, they have their airtime. So we don't kind of hog the mic and keep on talking. So it's very much on the behavioral level, kind of encouraging everybody's contribution. It's difficult by the sounds of it, of what you're describing it as an inverted pyramid, to kind of even fight that, and I understand it, and that's why I'm always an advocate for a flatter hierarchy. And if you don't feel like this current hierarchy enables you doing the good work, I guess the question is like, what do you want to do next as an individual? I don't believe necessarily in large organizations changing just because they feel they want to be better. They change out of the drive of like either not performing. Something very, very substantial needs to make them change their course. So it's very much about kind of personal, at that point when you feel like you're at the bottom of that hierarchy and you want to invert it, it's not about being the hero. To me, it's about understanding what's your next step and how might you find an area or a place which will, you will respond to as a part of a flatter hierarchy. So yeah, to me, that's that. Sorry, I don't know if that answered this question. There is no magical way to invert the pyramid when it exists in people's heads, but there is a better way to recreate it. And you have a lot of places that are eager and willing to go, with very flat hierarchy and very much inclusive culture, and you can be a part of building that. So. It's a very, very good point. First advice it's not really an advice, it's just a kind of observation. Neither of us here like change, especially when it happens to us, not something that we proactively choose. And then the way that we found one of the good ways of dealing with it is documenting and elevating positive behaviors as they happen all the time. So say the behavior, so we've talked about the values, right? We have certain values. Every time the behavior happens, we created like separate Slack channels, separate things to just like elevate it all the time and remind people that this is exactly how we should be behaving. And same thing in the team, in our team, this is how we should not be doing things. So there was a channel for yes and a channel for no. And that made a difference to us, because even memory wise, like you don't keep values in memory all the time, especially if they're created on a company level, but you do certain behaviors like letting people speak in the room, letting certain things happen, and encouraging kind of more diverse, open, inclusive approaches. So I would say documenting and elevating was like really key for us to keep going. And of course, leaders and leaders that are appointed as even a part of this kind of vertical team as like holders of the value. So in one of the companies I worked for, actually, when we made change, like substantial amount of restructuring, we made sure that we have owners. So like there is a value of openness, and say I'm the owner of it. That means my performance as a leader of the team is judged on that. So like I will not get where I want to get to if I don't encourage those behaviors. Personal responsibility. And kind of pointing to personal responsibility of the individual made a lot of difference when we were dealing with change.